Penn State has found their way into the Big Ten championship game. It's going down at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indy. And of course, the Oregon Ducks, the undefeated Oregon Ducks, the only undefeated team in major college football, is going to be there awaiting them. Oregon is a 3.5 point favorite in this one. The over under is set at 49.5, the last I saw. And this was a big surprise to everybody. Obviously, Ohio State losing to Michigan prompted Penn State to be able to, kind of in a way back themselves in to the Big Ten championship. Although they've only got one loss, so they won their way there. But um, uh, due to the loss by Ohio State received from Michigan, Penn State has found themselves in this position. This is an interesting matchup, and I'm glad that we don't have a rematch here in the Big Ten championship. I'm glad that we get to talk about a new matchup here. Penn State has been a team that has been surprisingly good within the Big Ten as far as offensive numbers. That the yards, the rushing yards, the passing yards, they've all been really good. The whole kit and caboodle for Penn State in this football game is turning those yards into points. They've got to figure out a way to capitalize and not kick field goals and score touchdowns. That's what this game is going to boil down to for Penn State. Whether this one, that's going to depict whether this one is close or not so close. Oregon, I think, is clearly got a little bit of a step on Penn State at this point. I think you've obviously got the most experienced college quarterback that you could possibly have going for you at Oregon, and the run game has really started to look better. You've got elite playmakers out on the outside, and that's more than what Penn State, I feel like, can say. Penn State has used Tyler Warren as their master key to the lock on their offense. He is their offense and everything that has to do with it, Mason. He runs the ball, he catches the ball, he could play quarterback, he plays offensive line. He can do everything, man. I mean, he can absolutely do everything. Oregon is going to have to dedicate a lot of their defensive game plan to figuring out a way to limit him. And Penn State, on the other hand, Kotelnicki has got to figure out a way to utilize his strengths against this Oregon defense that has been pretty doggone stout. Pretty doggone stout. What do you think about in this one, man? I obviously I like Oregon. It's hard to bet against Oregon this year. I mean, they've been one of the most consistent teams in the country. If you take out really that first game of the year, excuse me, they've been terribly consistent. So, where does Penn State have an edge here, do you feel like?
Looking at these two teams, they're actually pretty even now. Uh, and then I guess really you look at Oregon's overall schedule. I guess it might be a little bit harder if you look at the strength of schedule. Might be a little bit harder than Penn State's here. But you're kind of splitting hairs when you look at the quality of opponents here. But comparing the teams on a broad scale, Oregon's offense is slightly better than Penn State's offense, and Penn State's defense is slightly better than Oregon's defense. It's generally a really, or I think if you were to play this game, 100 times, I think that it would be within 5 games that one team or the other would win. What's actually pretty interesting, though, is that Penn State's offense is third in the country in completion percentage at 71.7%.
Mhm.
And then Oregon is first in the country at 73.6%. So these quarterbacks for both of these teams have been finding their receivers and finding them quite a bit. And they also protect the football really well. The interceptions are down for both teams. Oregon is averaging just half of an interception per game, which is really good. And so is Penn State. They're both ranked 26 in the country in interceptions. So I expect a pretty clean game. I expect it to be a very physical game. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to come down to who can run the football better. Right now, it looks like Penn State does a little bit of a better job of running the football. They're averaging about 25 more yards per game in comparison to Oregon. But when I look at Penn State and their the opponents that they've played, obviously you got the common opponent in Ohio State, but outside of that, I don't there's not really a great defense that they face. I think Minnesota might be the next best defense that Penn State has faced this year, depending on how you value Wisconsin or an Illinois defense at that time. I'm kind of wondering what this offense is going to do against a step up in defense. And I mean, we all saw the Ohio State game where they couldn't even score 20 points. But I don't know, man. I don't know how I'm gonna kind of weigh this out for my prediction on Tuesday night show. I'm leaning. My first thought was Oregon's going to blow the door off of them, and then you start to break this down a little bit more, and you realize, well, Penn State. We probably just haven't seen them as much because they haven't been in a lot of big matchups. So it's tough to really look at their schedule or watch them play even in these lesser games and get a good gauge of who they are as a team. But looking at some of their wins, I mean, some pretty gutsy performances. They come back and beat Minnesota by only 1 point, but I think Minnesota's a pretty good team at this point. They've definitely earned my respect. Go out west and face USC and only beat them by 3 points. I think there are a couple of data points for Penn State, anyways, that you point to and say, well, oh, why didn't you beat that team? Better than you did there. As a number 4 team in the country, you would expect them to just pummel all the lesser opponents, similar to what Indiana has done all year. But that hasn't really been the case. And I don't necessarily think that means that Penn State is a bad team or not as good as Oregon or Indiana or Ohio State or anybody like that. I think that it really comes down to game plan and this Penn State team kind of finding its identity. And it seems like Kotelnicki's got them going in the right direction. I think that they've opened up the playbook a little bit more as the season's gone on. And now you're starting to see Tyler Warren featured in every single week in a way that he probably wasn't as much before the USC game. So finding that sort of diamond in the rough, Swiss Army knife that every team wishes that they had, but really only one team this year has in Penn State, I think has really exploded this offense in a way that I do feel they could potentially cause Oregon some problems in this game. And also couple that with the fact that Oregon's the one that has to travel across country this year or this week to play Penn State, and whereas Penn State just has a short little plane ride over to Lucas Oil. How does that factor in for Oregon? I think we're in for a fist fight, Mark. I think it's going to be a really good game. We've seen, if rivalry week wasn't enough of an example, I don't know what is, but we've seen when these young kids play in these emotional games, anything could happen. And obviously Vegas tends to believe that as well. Oregon's only a 3.5 point favorite in this football game. I think it's for good reason. This game could go either way, Mark, and I'm thinking that the team that can get to about 180 yards on the ground is going to win this football game. I'm gonna have to wait till Tuesday to give a prediction here. I'm just not ready to give it yet.
Yeah, I'm not ready to give my prediction yet, but here's my points of contention, and here's what I'm going to do between now and Tuesday. I want to look and see how good Penn State is against the explosive offenses. That's what I want to see, because I think the number one way that you can limit this Oregon offense is keep everything in front of you. Don't allow them to hit the big, massive, explosive plays. Make them dink and dunk down the field, and they're good at that. I'm not saying Oregon can't do that, but Dylan Gabriel doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. And this year, where he's had the most trouble as far as like turnovers and things like that is in the red zone. And I think this is an athletic enough Penn State defense to where they get down in the red zone where the field is short and the windows are very small. I think Penn State, it's possible that they could come away with a turnover or two. But to be able to get them in situations like that, you can't allow them to hit Evan Stewart or Tez Johnson or any of these guys to hit these long bomb plays and score from way out. Make them earn it. You've got to make them earn it and keep chopping against this Oregon offense. I know they're going to be able to move the football, but can you limit the explosives? And the second thing is, can Penn State get after the quarterback in this situation? And that goes for Oregon as well. Oregon can really make things heck for Penn State if they can figure out a way to get some pressure and get some tackles for loss and or sacks. But Penn State, I think it matters for them even more defensively to be able to get after Dylan Gabriel, get him off of his spot, and make him uncomfortable. And that's really what it's going to boil down to. The offensive line for Oregon has ironed out to be a really good one. There was a moment in time earlier this season where they were a little rocky on that offensive line. So, maybe Penn State is able to get in there and exploit some of that. I think those are some points of contention for that game and some keys to victory for Penn State there, and something I really want to kind of look more into as the week goes on. So we'll see you guys on Tuesday to break this one down further here on First and Long.